It's 1991, and 12-year-old Yusuke Murata is sitting in front of his TV, ready to play the newly released Mega Man 4. Before he could select a level, Yusuke saw a familiar sight in the brand new game, his very own Mega Man boss. He had been one of 70,000 entrants into an illustration contest held by the developers at Capcom. Yusuke's Dustman was one of just 8 selected creations to appear in the final game. For his efforts, he received a gold cartridge of Mega Man 4, one of 8 specially made copies given only to the contest winners. More than 20 years later, Yusuke had achieved worldwide fame as the illustrator for One Punch Man, and his golden Mega Man cartridge just so happened to be one of the most valuable games ever produced, priced at over $6,000 by the mid-2010s. As the kids of the 80s and 90s grew into adulthood in Japan and around the world, they rediscovered the games of their youth, and some were willing to spend big money on rare titles. Cartridges that once sat at the bottom of clearance bins became valuable again. In 1996, the NES game Little Samson was just 4 years old, and a used copy was priced at $6.99. It was barely worth trading in. By 2016, you couldn't find a copy for less than $1,000, and that was just for a bare cartridge. What was becoming even more valuable were unopened copies of old games. In July 2020, a sealed and graded copy of Super Mario Bros. Sold for $114,000, setting the record for most expensive video game ever. But it wasn't just the old video games themselves that became more expensive over time. It was their ephemera too. Where Mario had breakfast cereal, Pokemon has cards.
What is the #1 most wanted card available right now?
The most sought-after Pokemon card here in the States is Charizard.
The big craze seems to be the Charizard card.
So once somebody gets started, the next thing they need is immediately Charizard.
Ask any 90s kid about expensive Pokemon cards, and they'll probably tell you about the first edition base set Charizard. With a beefy 120 HP and a powerful attack that could shred most Pokemon in one hit, Charizard was a staple card sought after for many decks in the first years of the game. This version of Charizard comes from the base set, the first series of cards ever released for the trading card game. The set contains some of the most popular first-generation Pokemon, and Charizard may be the most desired of them all. But what really adds to the value of this card is a small first edition symbol, marking it as one of the first print run of cards that released in the United States in January 1999. One of the first print runs from the first set of trading cards for the biggest media franchise in history. It should come as no surprise that a pristine, base set, first edition Charizard sold for $220,000 in October 2020. Expensive and powerful cards like Magic the Gathering's Black Lotus are still playable in certain formats. That old Charizard, however, is unusable in the game today, dwarfed by newer and stronger cards. A 2016 reprint to celebrate Pokemon's 20th anniversary beefed up its stats, adding more hit points and doubling its attack power to make it playable in the contemporary format. Despite being more powerful in game terms, the newer card is worth a mere $600, depending on condition. And it turns out that very first Charizard isn't even the most valuable Pokemon card. In 2020, a similarly unplayable card sold for a record price, the most expensive Pokemon card ever sold publicly, the Pokemon Illustrator. Known as the Pikachu Illustrator or Illustrator Pikachu, it is one of, if not the most unique Pokemon cards ever printed. While relatively unknown compared to the world-renowned Charizard, the Illustrator has become a holy grail, impossible to find or even afford when it appears on the auction block. And to see why collectors would spend more on a small piece of cardboard than a new Aston Martin, we have to go back to a time before Pokemon was an international phenomenon.
ねえねえ、私のポケットモンスターと勝負しない？
あんただーれ？
モンスター全部で150種類。通信ケーブルでモンスター取り替えっこ。スーパーゲームボーイならカラーで綺麗。仲間が増えるロールプレイング。ポケットモンスター。赤を買うか緑を買うかちょっと違うよ。
It's 1996, Little Samson costs just $7, and Pokemon fever is sweeping Japan. 2 years before the games would release in the West, Pocket Monsters Red and Green introduced the first generation of fantastical creatures to kids, giving them a reason to hold on to their aging Game Boy hardware. Publishing company Media Factory gained the rights to produce the official Pokemon trading card game, capturing a young player base eager to collect, trade, and play with the cards that represented their favorite Pokemon. In the early days of the game, Pokemon cards generally fell into 3 categories. There were, of course, the Pokemon themselves, trainer cards that acted like items from the game, and energy cards, type-based resources that fueled Pokemon and their abilities. The art cemented the card game's visual identity for a generation, giving full-color life to characters normally experienced as 8-bit sprites on an unlit monochrome screen. If you're thinking of a first-generation Pokemon, the picture in your mind was probably drawn by Ken Sugimori, art director of the entire franchise. Mitsuhiro Arita illustrated some of the most iconic set cards, including the legendary base set Charizard. Kagemaru Himeno added flavor to Sugimori's and Arita's on-model designs, fleshing out the evolutions, among other Pokemon. Keiji Kinebuchi contributed distinct 3D renders, and his trainer and energy card designs are burned into the memory of hardened tournament brawlers. It took 3 sets to print all 151 of the first-generation Pocket Monsters, Base Set, Jungle, and Fossil, all released between the fall of 1996 and the summer of 1997. And then came Team Rocket.
To protect the world from devastation.
To unite all peoples within our nation.
To denounce the evils of truth and love.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
Jesse!
James.
Yeah, that's very dramatic.
Released in November 1997, Team Rocket brought a darker tone that contrasts with the brighter colors of earlier cards. The set also introduced dark Pokemon, pocket monsters seemingly evolved under the criminal syndicate's dark influence. Rather than growing stale after a year of releases, the Pokemon card game continued to develop in new ways, and it was time to get the fans involved. Since the late 1970s, the monthly CoroCoro comic has been a tastemaker for generations of Japanese kids. Ostensibly a monthly anthology of children's manga, companies use it to build hype about whatever media product they're trying to sell. The November 1997 issue featured juicy news about Gold and Silver, the next generation of Pokemon games. It also announced a contest. Kids could submit their own Pokemon artwork for the chance to be immortalized as official cards in the next set. Known as the Vending Series, this set of cards would not be obtainable through traditional booster packs. Instead, the cards were peeled from sheets, distributed via Bandai vending machines. Not only did the Vending Series experiment radically with its method of distribution, it built off of Team Rocket's funky aesthetic, featuring some of the most striking art ever committed to a Pokemon card. After a storm of submissions, CoroCoro announced the contest winners. Yuki Kawamura's Poliwrath, Keita Takahashi's Snorlax, and Kasumi Matsuda's Mr. Mime would all become real-life Pokemon cards in just a few months. If that wasn't enough, the winners received something extra, a card that officially recognized their artistic talent. The Illustrator card. Virtually everything about the Illustrator card makes it special, a one-of-a-kind card in a game with more than 7,000 unique designs and counting. At first glance it might appear the same as an ordinary trainer card, but it's actually labeled as an Illustrator, the only card in this category. The art, an original illustration by Pikachu creator Atsuko Nishida, has never been reprinted on another card. The Illustrator itself has no function within the game. Instead, the body text reads, "Due to the excellent quality of your entry to the Pokemon Card Game Illustration Contest, you are officially recognized with the honor of Pokemon Card Illustrator." So singular is this card that it belongs to its own set, symbolized by the fountain pen. No other card before or since bears this mark. And in the bottom right corner sit 2 tiny black stars, a supreme level of rarity. Even Charizard only has 1. The only other cards to possess the 2-star level of rarity are trophy cards presented to the winners of official tournaments held in Japan in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Those cards are also extremely valuable, selling from $100,000 to $200,000 depending on their vintage and condition. In total, 39 Illustrator cards were issued to winners and runners-up of illustration contests held in 1997 and 1998. One notably went to Kazuhiko Nishihara, whose Mewtwo design also became an official card. Decades later, a couple of extra copies surfaced online, most likely surplus prints held onto by high-up insiders. The exact number of illustrators printed remains uncertain, but it could be fewer than 50. Less than 50 in a card game with an average print run in the millions. By the year 2020, 19 Illustrator cards had been certified by PSA, the card grading service most closely identified with Pokemon. Even that first edition Charizard has more than 2,500 certified copies. Combine a legendary story, intense scarcity, and the world's most popular media franchise, and you have virtually every key necessary for an extremely valuable card. Even in the early 2000s, a slow period for the card game, the Illustrator reportedly sold for $23,000. In 2016, as the Pokemon Go boom expanded Pokemon's already widespread popularity, a graded copy sold for nearly $55,000. And in 2020, it moved for a touch over $230,000, the most amount of money publicly spent on a Pokemon card. Around the same time, American YouTuber Logan Paul claimed to have spent $150,000 on an Illustrator. In a staged Instagram video, he revealed the card to be a forgery, then punched a window in fake anger. The joke landed him in the hospital. All of that because of a legendary piece of cardboard. Thanks for watching, and mahalo.